In this episode, we will take a deep dive into the accounts and experiences that happened to a man named Travis Walton one dark night in the woods near Snowflake, Arizona, on November 5th, in 1975. This story is one of the most famous alien abduction cases, right on par with the extraordinary story of Barney and Betty Hill. He shares his experiences in his book, Fire in the Sky, which has also been made into a documentary film. Travis Walton was at the time of the incident 22 years old, and on this day he was out working with logging, with 7 other co-workers. What adds to this story's credibility is the fact that the abduction was observed by all 7 co-workers who reported seeing the same thing with the same line of events. They all have since the incident passed several military-grade lie detector tests. They were interviewed separately, and they were basically saying the same things, only using different words. Travis has never changed his story. He didn't necessarily get along with all the other co-workers all the time, and they still collaborate his story right on point. Travis has currently done 5 separate polygraph tests and has passed every single one of them. After a full day's work, he and his co-workers was kind of jacked up and started chatting with each other while loading in equipment in the car for their journey back home. Sometime during their drive back on the dirt road, he saw some kind of glow, a hazy glow of sorts, coming through the trees. He thought it was not a big deal. It could have just been some hunters. Since it was deer hunting season, nobody made a big deal out of it, but it was still something strange. The growing on the side of the road was quite thick, except for a clearing that was a bit further down the road. When they reached the clearing, they saw the source of the light they had spotted earlier. It was a big glow that instantly blew their minds. They stopped to watch. For some reason, Travis took up on it. He inexplicably ran towards it. He thought it was gonna take off and be gone in a flash. So out of curiosity, he took the opportunity to run towards it. He was about 90 feet away. Later they found out that they were not the only ones who saw it. The sheriff had on file people who were in the area. These other witnesses were hunters and fishermen staying near Black Canyon Lake. They described the movement of the object the same way that his crew described it when it later left and flew away. They said that the glow first begun rising up and flying up towards the northeast. Another witness worked in the military intelligence. He and his wife was deer hunting at the time, and they swear by what they saw. Later, Travis found out there were even more official investigations that took place than was made public. The whole clearing was lit up with some kind of glow. The glow was strange and made everything look eerie. It had a soft golden color to it, like a haze of light from most of its surface. There were no beams of light coming from it, and it was not so bright that you could not take a look directly at it. The craft seemed metallic and had a classic disc shape. Travis has said that the description the scientist Bob Lazar has made, who was enrolled in a program at the Site S4 near Area 51 to back engineer alien spacecrafts, matches the closest of what he saw. The company called Testers has made a replica of this model, also called the Sports model, made from the descriptions of Bob Lazar. The object suddenly started to move, and it made some strange sounds. It was a low thunderous rumble and was more felt than heard. They could at the same time hear a high-pitched sound of sorts. It suddenly got loud when the craft started to move. At this moment, his co-workers started to yell. They shouted that he should get away from there and to get back in the truck with them. As soon as it moved, Travis got startled and jumped down and forward for cover behind a log that was laying there. He was at this time 8 to 10 feet away from the craft. Suddenly an energy discharge happened, and perhaps because he now was so close to the object, the discharge hit him in the chest area. At this moment his co-workers feared the worst and yelled, "It got him!" His co-workers then ran away and drove away in a panic. Nearly wrecked the truck in a hastily departure. They were utterly terrified. Later they came back and didn't see his body where they last saw it. and searched the surrounding area and could not find him anywhere. They had only one flashlight and so stayed together. In intense emotional distress, they searched in vain. Some of them started to cry in desperation. During the time that Travis was missing, the police first suspected that his co-workers actually had killed him. Travis' oldest brother didn't believe their incredible story either. He also thought they had killed him, and the whole incident was just something they had cooked up to try to cover their involvement in his death. Some of the work that they were doing before the abduction was piling up the brush from the logging in the clearing, so that the Forest Service later, when the weather conditions were right, could burn this excess material to reduce the fire danger in the woods. His brother was so convinced that they had killed him that he began searching for his body in the debris piles near the supposed site of the abduction. His other brother, on the other hand, believed their story. When Travis began regaining his consciousness, it was at first very dim and returned slowly. He went in and out of consciousness a couple of times. He felt a pain and thought he was mortally wounded. He was laying on the back on a raised table of sorts, and there was a light above him. This light was not too bright. He could still see the outline of the fixture. He was wearing the same clothes when he woke up. They had no damage from the blast. After some time, however, he realized that he was not alone in whatever place this was. He laid eyes on one of the several creatures that occupied the space, and he could instantly see that this being was not anything that resembled a human. In his description, he said that they were hairless, had a nose and mouth, and had very large eyes. Something that resembled a classic description of an alien. He did not see them speak or change their facial expressions. Their lack of reaction added to his panic. Later he thought that maybe they were telepathic. And because they didn't need to talk, they would not need facial expressions the same way as humans do. The image of these creatures, coupled with the immense experience of pain, made him associate this trauma with them. And because of this, he went into a full panic. Although these creatures did not attack him, he lashed out on them out of fear. He managed to knock one of them into another creature relatively easy, and then rolled of the table in the other direction. Their bodies were very light and smooth. They weighed hardly anything. 3 of them came around the table and towards him. He managed to grab an object nearby and started to swing it towards them in desperation. This object had a large long cylinder shape, like a rod of glass that consisted of some clear material. He began swinging wildly and started screaming threats. He could then see a doorway on the other side of the room behind them. He felt a feeling of suffocation coupled with a weird feeling in his head. Maybe it had something to do with his injuries, inhibiting him to breathe normal, or perhaps the composition of the atmosphere in this area. He thought that maybe this feeling in the head was their attempt to telepathically reassure and soothe him, but it did not work. He was not going to cooperate. They had trouble focusing his mind, and he had a lot of adrenaline in his system. He was experiencing total fear and a feeling of being threatened. The creatures then suddenly retreated and left the room. Minutes later, a being entered the room that looked totally human. Maybe it was a human alien that looked just like us, or a creation they made that they brought to assist and help the situation. Because of his human-like appearance, he seemed a little less threatening. He was wearing a tight-fitting blue uniform that had no flags or other marks of identification. He was in an extremely good shape and was strong-looking, athletic. He had longish hair of light color. He could walk through a crowd here on Earth and nobody would raise an eyebrow. Travis started to scream and was totally hysterical and started to ask questions. What am I doing here? What are these things? What happened? The human gave no answers. He was wearing a helmet, a clear helmet, maybe because of the atmosphere. The being was in a hurry to get him out of there. Travis was willing to go. He took him by the arm, and they exited the craft. He never talked back or responded. This human-looking being was something more familiar, so he trusted him and felt a bit reassured. The human-looking alien smiled a little, but he was not inclined to talk or answer any questions. Outside of the craft, it was easier to breathe. They got into a big room. It might have been inside a larger craft of some sort, or a base, maybe a building on the ground. They walked down a ramp, and he noticed it was cooler, not as much humid as inside the ship. There were lights in the room that had a sunlight look to it. He also noticed that there were other disc-shaped crafts in this room. He was anxious, and went through doors that led down a hallway. Then they went into a room where there were other people that also looked human, with no helmets. He felt a bit more relieved and thought he could now get some answers, but they did not answer his questions, and he started to panic again and resist. He was still very weak and felt injured, so they could easily force him onto a table that was in this room. A female person put a device on his face, something that resembled a gas mask. He did not see any tubes or anything from it. This seemed to be some kind of anesthetics, because as soon as that mask came over his face, he just blacked out. He did not feel any pain from this procedure. The next thing that Travis remembered was that he woke up on the ground. He could feel the cold coming back into his clothes and saw a light shining from above. He tried to see where the light came from, but before he could, it disappeared. He did, however, see a silver metallic disc hovering and shoot up straight to the sky in parallel to the earth. The object created a little stir in the air that he felt, and he could see some tree branches moving in the nearby. It was completely out of sight really quick. He was in an area in the woods relatively close to the abduction site, right outside of town. It was in the middle of the night. He thinks this was a perfect drop spot, because there was not a big chance that the craft would be seen. He saw the nearby lights of the town and started to run for help. He found a phone booth and made a call to his family. They were at first a bit suspicious and thought this might be some kind of a prank call, since his disappearance was widely known. He had at this time been missing for 5 days. The family came to his rescue and brought him home. At this point, he was having a nervous breakdown. Understandably, he was very scared and traumatized. He described some of the details of the event, but they did not press him further because of his mental state. His brother was the first person he told his experience to. The brother had also seen a UFO a number of years before, which had quite an effect on him. And because of this, he was very sympathetic about Travis' traumatic experience. A few days later, he did a regression hypnosis, conducted at his brother's house, witnessed by several psychiatrists to reveal further details. The hypnosis helped him a lot to deal with the experience. He could get into an extreme relaxed state, which helped him a lot to process and deal with the entire experience. He also did MRI scans, EKG, and blood tests, which showed that there was not a trace of any drugs in his system. Some later expeditions to the site took a closer look at the trees that belonged to the clearing where the UFO had landed and did a cross-section to look at the earrings. To their amazement, there was an abnormality. The rings appeared normal in size, corresponding to the seasons, except for the year of the incident. The earrings had been enlarged considerably all around this clearing, and only on the side facing where the craft had been, not on the other side. So the object apparently had a biological effect on the surrounding trees. Later analysis of samples from the trees showed that the pine trees around the Chernobyl nuclear disaster showed the same type of increased growth. It seems that exposure to a radioactive source stimulates the growth of trees to grow abnormally. Another interesting fact is that this area of Snowflake, Arizona, has the highest frequency of lightning strikes in the USA, except for the Everglades. The theory is that maybe this phenomenon had something to do about why this craft was here. Lightning discharges to the ground can create a fusing and vitrifying mineral called fulgurite. These mineral crystals can have special properties, which might be of interest for these strange beings. As time passed, a lot of skeptics have been trying to discredit Travis. Some of them said that they were drunk, and that the psychiatrist who conducted the hypnosis was also drunk, which obviously was not true. They have also misquoted Travis to try to disqualify his story. He does not want this story to elicit fear. He thinks that these beings are benign and did not want to cause him any harm. The fact that these beings returned him is very significant. If they had a sinister intention, it would have been a done deal. If they wanted to replace us on this planet, we would not even know what hit us. These beings could, in theory, be millions of years ahead of us in technological development. Travis says that this abduction really happened, that this is a very real phenomenon. People need to know about this, not in an alarming way, but we need to be ready. The way some people try to explain away this phenomenon with ridicule, to say that people who are experiencing this is crazy, does not do us any good. I do believe that a kind of US governmental secrecy is indeed wanted and needed, because this can be some very sensitive information, and we do not necessarily want some adversaries to realize how much we actually know about this phenomenon.